The crew chief of an anti-submarine helicopter which crashed is pronounced dead. An investigation is underway. China suspends imports of another fish from Taiwan, claiming the packaging tested positive for COVID-19. Ukraine takes a landmark first step to EU membership 4 months after Russia invaded the country.
Leah!
And Taiwan's new champion, the popular American reality cooking show MasterChef Junior, reveals its winner. A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Yin Khvat. The chief of a Taiwan Navy helicopter that crashed earlier this week passed away on Thursday evening after suffering severe burns. The other 3 crew members are still in hospital. Military experts are questioning the Navy's description of the crash as a hard landing. Bing Wang reports.
A solemn send-off for Liu Sangjun, the crew chief of the Taiwanese Navy helicopter that crashed on Wednesday. He was pronounced dead Thursday night due to injuries sustained in the crash. Authorities say the 3 other crew members are in stable condition.
Taiwan's
Navy first reported that the helicopter made a hard landing at Zuoying Naval Base in the southern port city of Kaohsiung. But military experts are questioning the Navy's description. Some believe a tail rotor failure is the likely cause of the crash.
直升机后面有个小螺旋桨，那如果这个小螺旋桨失效的话，那直升机就打转往下掉。所以它应该不是一个迫降。
It's the 4th crash involving an S-70C anti-submarine helicopter since it entered service over 30 years ago. Taiwan's Navy says it has grounded the remaining 18 S-70Cs in its fleet while it investigates the cause of the crash. For now, the family of Liu and the remaining crew members must wait for answers. Damon Lin and Bing Wang for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan recorded 45,767 new cases of COVID and 152 COVID-linked deaths on Friday. The number of new daily cases continues to drop, but the deaths reported remained in the 100 to 200 range, which Taiwan has seen throughout June. The health minister was back on the podium for the first time in almost 2 weeks after testing positive for COVID. Taiwan has declared monkeypox a Category 2 disease, meaning all cases must be reported within 24 hours. The country has not yet confirmed any cases, though officials announced a suspected infection last week. Other places in Asia, such as South Korea and Singapore, have reported their first cases. The virus has spread to more than 42 countries. Monkeypox symptoms include fever and rash. The disease is usually found in parts of Africa. China has suspended imports of horse mackerel from a Taiwanese firm after reporting its packaging tested positive for COVID-19. The week-long suspension from Taiwan's Donghe Food Industries comes after China placed a blanket suspension on grouper imports earlier this month, claiming the presence of banned chemicals. China has blamed several of its COVID-19 outbreaks on traces of the virus found on items from overseas, including a letter mailed from Canada and salmon from Norway. Taiwan's cabinet has approved an amendment to make driving under the influence of narcotics a criminal offence. Under current law, driving while high is only an offence if the driver is judged to be operating a vehicle unsafely. The revised text makes any driving after drug use an offence against public safety. Offenders could face a maximum of 3 years in prison and a fine of $1,000. The amendment follows a push by public safety groups to raise awareness of the dangers of driving while on drugs. It will be sent to the legislature for approval. The European Union has granted Ukraine and Moldova candidate status to join the 27-member group. European officials are describing the decision as an historic moment, which comes 4 months after Russia invaded Ukraine. But as James Chater reports, achieving candidate status is only the first step on a long road to formal membership.
At a meeting in Brussels, European Union leaders put Ukraine and Moldova on the path to EU membership. The two countries' EU candidate status marks the beginning of an application process that can take years. It's seen as a powerful symbol of the country's desire to move closer to Europe, after Russia launched in February the largest land invasion of a European nation since World War II.
Let me stress that I'm deeply convinced that our decision that we have taken today strengthened us all. It strengthens Ukraine, Moldova and Georgia in the face of Russian aggression, and it strengthens the European Union.
Russia's invasion triggered the exact response it was intended to prevent, with the application of all three countries to the EU coming soon after the invasion began. Only Ukraine and Moldova have achieved candidate status for now. EU officials say Georgia requires more reform before candidate status can be conferred. In Kyiv, Ukraine's president welcomed the decision.
Тільки що отримали кандидатство. Це перемога. Чекали 120 днів і 30 років. А потім переможемо ворога і будемо відпочивати.
Outside the European Parliament in Brussels, Ukrainians in the Belgian capital unfurled a 30-metre national flag.
It is a huge step for Ukraine. It is a really legendary day for every Ukrainian, and I'm really glad to be here. And being here, you can feel all Ukrainian spirit, all spirit of our heroes who are fighting every day in Ukraine.
Despite Ukrainian celebrations, EU officials emphasise that membership is not guaranteed. Tackling corruption and enacting legal reforms are just two things they say are necessary before access is formally granted.
Of course, the countries all have to do homework before moving to the next stage of the accession process. But I am convinced that they will all move as swiftly as possible and work as hard as possible to implement the necessary reforms.
It's the beginning of a long process for Ukraine and Moldova, but gaining EU candidate status demonstrates how the political architecture of Europe is shifting in the face of Russia's invasion. Rick E. and James Chater for TaiwanPlus.
To find out more about Ukraine's EU candidacy, our reporter James Chater spoke to Bruno Lette, a senior fellow at the German Marshall Fund of the United States.
Why is EU accession such an important goal for Ukraine?
Well, the European Union is a club, a political club, an economic club, but also a club of values. Let's not forget this. The European Union is a club of democracies. The European Union, for many member states, also, for instance, the member states that joined early 2000 in Central and Eastern Europe, we see that the European Union always offers a leverage to create more peace and prosperity. And that's exactly what Ukraine is aiming for.
EU accession does normally take many years. Do you think the grinding nature of the war going forward is likely to impact Ukraine's accession prospects?
Becoming an EU member is a very complicated process. The first step, for instance, is to Ukraine will have to adopt the so-called acquis communautaire. The acquis communautaire is basically all the guidelines and rules of laws that apply within the European Union. So Ukraine will have to implement massive reforms in all parts of society, in all economic sectors. It has to think about also reforming government structures. It has to fight corruption. So these are all phenomenal challenges that will take quite some time, many years indeed.
Could Moldova and Georgia be risking Russian retaliation by also seeking to join the EU?
For all three countries, Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia, these are countries that have been suffering from Russian aggression. In each of these countries, there are frozen conflicts, there are territories being occupied by the Russian armed forces. I'm sure that Russia will also try to do whatever it can when it comes to disinformation and misinformation and projecting false narratives about the European Union to the populations. So all these kind of things we can expect to happen.
Russia's invasion of Ukraine is now 4 months old. Could you summarize how the war has changed the continent geopolitically?
I think that the security architecture that we used to have in Europe is gone. So basically, we need to find a new some sort of security architecture. The problem that right now, everything is in flux. Basically, we have an ongoing war in Ukraine, but also very strong tensions between Europe, but also transatlantically with the United States, with Russia.
The European Commission has been working to defuse a growing crisis around Kaliningrad, a Russian exclave. Tensions are running high as neighbouring Lithuania has stopped the transport of EU-sanctioned goods over its territory into Kaliningrad. Russia has threatened retaliatory action if Lithuania doesn't unblock the passage of Russian steel and construction materials. I asked Zsuzsa Anaferenzi, a EU policy expert at Taiwan Next Gen Foundation, what she thought of the term blockade being used by Moscow against Vilnius.
Now, the supply of essential goods remains unhindered. This is very important. The affected goods are machinery, steel products, construction materials, in line with the sanctions. So this is not a blockade, as Moscow claims it to be. The language coming out of Moscow has been that this is a hostile action, unilateral, individual and additional measure taken by Vilnius against Kaliningrad. But in fact, this is disinformation. So it shows us to what extent disinformation, state-backed, sustained, coordinated disinformation campaigns have been crucial to Moscow in justifying the unjustifiable, essentially, to justify its aggression against Ukraine, a sovereign neighbor.
Russia has threatened action against Lithuania, saying that it must protect its national interests. Is Lithuania prepared?
Well, Lithuania, just as Latvia and Estonia, all three Baltic countries depend on Russia for stable power supplies. According to Lithuanian officials, Lithuania is preparing in case there is a blackout caused by Russia. Lithuania has installed equipment to link its power to Poland, to the European grid. And in fact, there is a European project undergoing. So I believe that the most important thing is the message that Lithuania, supported by the European Union, sends to Russia, that this is another effort to undermine the EU from within. And this is why Kaliningrad is so important, because it lies at the heart of the EU and it gives Russia that access to its neighborhood there, the Baltic states and Central Eastern Europe, to spread disinformation, to continue its destabilization campaign.
As you mentioned, Lithuania is only implementing EU sanctions. It is a member of the EU and the EU backs it. What can the EU do to stop escalation?
The EU's member states have understood that there is a new geostrategic, geoeconomic, geopolitical reality that the EU needs to adapt to. We do see an awareness and we do see an understanding in the EU that no more time can be wasted when it comes to acting together, to protecting its interests, also to securing its neighborhood. So going forward, standing with Lithuania in solidarity, and physically supporting any country within the EU that faces coercion from Russia or from China is important. Because what we see right now with threats coming out of Moscow is essentially telling us that Moscow does not refrain from any attempt to weaponize, either if it's to weaponize information, gas, oil, electricity, any means that it can to undermine the EU further.
Coming up, we find out why this ghoulish exhibition in Tainan is scaring up controversy.
我想要音乐改变这个世界嘛，那其实不是老板帮我想，那个是我自己讲。 我很喜欢像 Bob Dylan、John Lennon 或是 Bob Marley 那一种有影响力的音乐家，那我就在幻想说，我是不是也可以跟他们一样干大事。
下雨的晚上，那个时候就开始试着帮他找出属于黄界的品牌核心，所以那时候我们抓出3个关键字，就是幽默、温暖、热情，是那个时候才开始有比较明确的去定调它。
好，我问凯特说，我有什么该说的还没说？他讲卖票，我听懂了啊。
虽然说，在这个追求音乐的过程，还有产业，会一直给人很多不同的那种冲击，但是我觉得他是一个很努力在保有自己喜欢音乐的热情的那一个。另外的角度，他其实也有某部分他的对生命的一些焦虑，他常常也会不太知道自己有多好。
你说写出很多温暖人心的歌，那个纯粹是因为我自己心里过不去，就是其实我的歌很多都是在解决我自己遇到的问题，所以我的歌词里面有很多我跟你，其实那个你都是我好像在对人家说什么，其实我是在对我自己说，你应该要这样子。现在什么想吗？完全不敢说我要用音乐改变这个世界，但是我还是会持续的做这件事情，因为改变1、2个人也算是改变了这个世界的一部分吧。让我们一起去走走，可以让你快乐的时候更快乐，可以让你难过的时候不那么难过。又或者是某一首歌在你的人生里象征着某一个时光，那我也改变了这个世界。让我慢慢告诉你。
For more stories from Taiwan and around the world, please make sure to download the TaiwanPlus app.
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. The US says NATO's new strategic concept, expected to be announced next week, will voice concerns about China, including its economic practices. As Jaime Ocon reports, the announcement is set to be made at the Leaders' Summit in Madrid and will not only put the war in Ukraine on the agenda, but also highlight security in Asia.
NATO's upcoming Leaders' Summit is seen as more crucial than ever as it takes place against a backdrop of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The alliance is considered to be a factor in Moscow's aggression. Ukraine was seeking to join the security treaty partnership before the tanks rolled in. So the summit in Madrid will be focusing on not only the current geopolitical situation playing out in Eastern Europe, but will also be looking to prevent possible future conflicts, putting China's growing influence and tensions in the Asia-Pacific region firmly on the agenda. The strategic concept, which is due to be announced, sets the tone for the talks ahead. It lays out the guidelines for NATO's international and security policy. On Thursday, Washington stressed the significance of alignment with its allies, especially when confronting China.
I think it's a reflection of our allies' equal concerns over the effect of Chinese economic practices, use of forced labor, intellectual theft, and coercive, aggressive behavior, not just in the region, but elsewhere around the world, that they believe it's important to factor China into the new strategic concept.
The partnership has 30 members, including the United Kingdom, Turkey, European Union countries, and the US. Following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the momentum for membership has picked up. Finland, which borders Russia, and Sweden have expedited their membership bid. For the first time, heads from the Asia-Pacific region will be taking part in the Leaders' Summit. The Japanese, Australian, and New Zealand prime ministers and South Korea's president are all due to attend. Piper Yu and Jaime Ocon for TaiwanPlus.
Chinese President Xi Jinping on Thursday criticized the abuse of international sanctions. He made the remarks as he hosted the 14th BRICS summit, attended online by members Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa. Xi said the 5 countries should come together to stand up against what he described as a new Cold War mentality. Russia's President Vladimir Putin, meanwhile, used the summit to push back against Western sanctions in response to his invasion of Ukraine. He said he was redirecting trade to countries like China and India. Flooding in southern China has reached historic levels as 500,000 people have been affected by heavy rainfall. Water levels in the Pearl River Delta in Guangdong province have hit their highest points in almost a century. Provincial emergency management authorities estimate that direct economic losses have surpassed $260 million. As the floodwaters approach the provincial capital Guangzhou and tech hub Shenzhen, there are fears that disruption to manufacturing could get worse. Neighbouring Guangxi and Fujian province have been impacted by the record rainfall, forcing hundreds of thousands to evacuate. Taiwan is pledging $1 million to help victims of an earthquake in Afghanistan. The magnitude 6.1 earthquake struck Wednesday near Afghanistan's border with Pakistan. It has killed at least 1,000 people and injured more than 1,000 others. Taiwan's foreign ministry said it hoped that destroyed homes could be rebuilt as soon as possible. It's Afghanistan's deadliest earthquake in 20 years. The country's Taliban-led government and the international aid community have struggled to get enough help to the remote area where the quake struck. An emergency response drill in Taiwan's northern city of Taoyuan has, for the first time, simulated a war scenario. As Wei Zhonglu reports, civil defense has become a key element of Taiwan's defense strategy.
People call for help on a rooftop before a rescue team arrives with a drone. Nearby, robots spray water to put out fires. This is a yearly emergency response drill held by Taoyuan City to simulate a disaster. But this year's staged disaster is a first.
那这一次的演练，那么包括了这个战时的情况，是这次演练最大的特色。
Taiwan's Ministry of Defense is taking part in the drills to make sure the war simulation is realistic. Civil defense abilities have become a key area in Taiwan's defense strategy. Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen was at the exercises. She says drills like this are important for national security.
最重要的就是要强化中央到地方的统筹能力，以及全民防卫的动员量能，来确保各级政府无论是在战时或在灾时都能够发挥功能，维持我们社会民生的正常的运作，减少人民生命财产的损失。
800 people participated in the drills, which simulated 21 emergency situations. With tension rising between Taiwan and China, the government in Taipei is calling on everyone to do what they can to protect themselves and the country. James Rayner and Wei Zhonglu for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's unemployment rate hit a 7-month high in May, with the current COVID-19 wave hampering an earlier recovery. The jobless rate came in at 3.68%, signalling a loss of 5,000 jobs from April, when case numbers of the Omicron variant started to pick up. Unemployment hit a 10-year high in June last year, when Taiwan experienced its first major outbreak of the pandemic. The rate started to decline steadily until January, when it reversed course. The service sector has struggled most, with hotels, restaurants and retailers hit hardest. And while COVID-19 cases appear to have peaked, the government says unemployment is likely to continue going up. An exhibition in southern Taiwan on Asian ghost culture has attracted controversy. Tainan Art Museum received complaints on social media after showing an image of ghoulish zombies that form part of the exhibit. Some posters said the exhibition would frighten children, while others expressed a superstitious belief that the show could bring about a curse. The exhibition Ghosts and Hells, the Underworld in Asian Art, was curated by a French museum. Tainan Art Museum has defended the exhibition with support from the city's mayor.
希望说大家去看这个展览的时候，要多从艺术文化，而不是从这个鬼灵精怪的方向去看。
13-year-old Taiwanese American Leah Chu has been crowned MasterChef Junior USA.
Leah!
The young chef won the hearts of the judges in the final on Thursday night by treating them to dishes inspired by her Taiwanese heritage. She wins a grand prize of $100,000 US, money that she says will go towards her college tuition. Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. I'm Yin Khvat. Finally today, we leave you with images of the Red Sea resort of Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. For more stories from Taiwan and around the world, please download the TaiwanPlus app. Stay safe and see you next time.